Thank you so much for being with me today.
My pleasure.
Love creating content that's going to be valuable for my students. They're preparing their public speaking content for the semester. Everyone is at different stages.
Sure.
But one thing we cannot deny is the power of video message in our world across so many different areas. And you own a business that is specific to creating video content, helping people get comfortable with making video content. Can you please speak to the power of sharing your voice online via video? What are your thoughts on that?
The most effective mode of communication is in person. There's so much we can gain when we're sharing the space with someone. There's body language, there's tone, reading between the lines. We're able to see how they are in context in the room, what else they're looking at when they're looking around the room. And second to being in person is video. And so much of it, I would say maybe even close to 90% of everything that we can gain in person, we're able to gain on video, be it live conversation video or recorded video. Kind of almost either way, we're able to really feel the person and have an emotional connection in a way that text, written articles simply just can't convey in the same way. And you can smile with your eyes, for example, and all those things come through even more so than the words I say. And even how I say the words, of course, has meaning and connotation. So, I think the challenge for all of us is trying to erase the pretense that the video camera kind of sometimes makes us feel as if we have to be different or put on a show, or now it's so much high pressure. And it's really the sincerity of who we are, being genuine, being natural, just, off the cuff. I think that's way more resonant and powerful in terms of sharing our voice.
I agree with you, first of all. Secondly, I can also see how a lot of times as students get ready to deliver a speech, they also feel like they somehow have to be different, even in person.
Yes.
Where the person, I say something to the students like, you don't have to check your personality at the door when you deliver your speech. In fact, we connect with the real you. So we're supposed to be bringing ourselves, our authentic selves, to the messages we communicate, whether that's in person or online. So I'm glad that you mentioned that. I agree.
Yeah, it's be more you than you've ever been, more than anything else. I would say more than not checking your personality at the door, it's really dawn the personality. It's your personality that is even more effective than the actual substantive message. Maybe anyone can read the script or recite the words, but what we each bring to the table is something we tell our clients and members all the time, that it's the actual content, while important, it's the conveying of that content and how we are and who we are really brings it alive. Not all of us have this dynamic personality, so we may not be like a motivational speaker and really high energy, and that's okay too, because some people get really turned off by that. And someone wants someone that's a little bit more slower in speech, a little slower in hand movements and not as frenetic. And so you connect with different people, and let's say you pretended to be really high energy and you attract that kind of people. Well, then whenever you're around those people, you kind of always have to pretend to be someone else. It's really difficult to do that.
That's an excellent point, which is why it's even more important to be our true selves.
Yeah.
Having said all that, it does make me think of one thing. There are people who struggle with sounding monotone or very low energy, and therefore people's filters come up. So there's difference between not being true to yourself, but also having to amp up some of these things that people connect to in public speaking, where it's not being disingenuous, but energy and vocal variety need to be there for people to stay interested and engaged. Do you agree with that?
Of course. I mean, I think there's a skill involved and a talent involved. Some people are more naturally that way. They have that X factor already. But these things can be learned. And yes, there is psychology involved. There is connection involved. So yes, be true to yourself, but also be open to improving. So not be closed-minded, like that's just the way I am. Well, maybe just the way you are can be better. I think we all can be better. We can all learn from one another.
Lastly, I want to ask you, if you could go back in time to your 18-year-old self, is there anything that you would do differently or a skill that you wish you had at the time?
Right out of college, I actually drove down to DC early morning. So I couldn't afford to stay in a hotel. So I left New York, I want to say at like 4 or 5 a.m. and got to DC for that 10 a.m. conference. And it was a storytelling conference. And I even knew back then that that was probably my biggest missing element, was knowing how to share a story and to bring people into a timeline, and then not only understanding kind of that past story, but then translating it to their future self. Of And then when I came back from DC, I ended up creating kind of a networking group around telling stories, and I think it was like the anecdote game, and it was kind of how can people really share a quick story, very similar to what we do now, but now we do it on video. But is how to architect that sound bite and kind of create that story arc. But knowing that the power, the more you can share with people your own quick anecdotes, and also painting the picture and the story of what other people are able to achieve once they enact your message, I think is extremely powerful. It's probably the one aspect, if you see the masters of public speaking and all the motivational gurus, they're amazing at telling stories. And, ultimately, I think that's what drives people, is that emotional connection of character development and stories, and seeing themselves within that story to some degree.
You have no idea how happy I am to hear you say that, because we spend so much time in class talking about storytelling. So I hope that my students hear this message loud and clearly from myself and from you, that throughout all of our lives, one of the most, or maybe even the most powerful technique in public speaking or sharing messages online is the power of telling your story well and being authentic in that and having people connect to it.
You didn't even tell me that, so I wasn't even a plant. So I'm happy to share that. Absolutely.
Oh, awesome. Thank you, Vic. I really appreciate your time today, and I think that my students will get a lot of, I think my students will get confirmation from some of the things that they already know are important, but it's wonderful to hear from somebody who's running a business that other people are coming to help them strengthen their online video recording skills, that transfers to real life business, to clients, to expanding into new areas, to adding interest and engagement in their businesses and organizations, that it's a skill that's needed in our modern world, in a technology driven world, and that these are the kind of things we connect to. And we know it instinctively because we all connect to videos online too. Whatever we like to watch, we love to watch videos. So we know that. But then when the camera's on us, it can be a very different feeling.
Practice. The first time is awkward. The second time is a lot different, and the third time, is the charm. And it's really easy. I think, young adults and kids growing up now, I think video is very enmeshed in their day-to-day, but it's the videos that we're talking about are more substantive, based on your expertise, as opposed to the silliness of life, which is also important. But here, it's even more awkward and scary because you're sharing your expertise and really sharing not only a story, but a substantive story that has a message and a call to action. And that's what fumbles a lot of people. But nevertheless, if they can get used to just being in front of a camera, the rest they can learn from you.
Thank you for that. Thank you so much for your time, Vic. I appreciate it. And I wish you the best. And hopefully we'll get to see you again sometime soon and talk more about video.
I'm looking forward to it.
Thanks, Vic.
Thanks.
It's very similar.
Yeah, go on.
It's so similar, which is so similar. I'm going to say it until I stop getting the echo. Go.